Hello everyone, this is Kate from the Narrate team here. They say that 1 in 6 Americans struggle with some form of anxiety. This week, Adam backs up the dump truck on anxiety and explains 5 extremely helpful points on how to deal with it.
Next weekend, we're starting a series called What the What? It'll be very fun. This weekend, we're just going to take 1 week, and as we've kind of talked about online, I have been researching anxiety a whole lot the last year, and so it just felt appropriate to kind of share what it is I've been learning. They say that 6 out of 10 Americans has a debilitating form of anxiety. 6 out of 10 Americans, their life is hindered by their inability to cope with and navigate and deal with anxiety. Now, I don't know where you land in all that. Chances are statistically, the majority of you are that. And if you're not that, you're probably married to someone who struggles that way, or maybe you're raising a child who struggles that way. Some of it is genetic, of course. Some of it is very nature-nurture stuff, right? Like, so some of it's localized to the experiences you have. Some of it's just genetics. My genetics are very calm, I'm told. I have very calm genes. What I want to do, though, is, I was 29 years old when I first realized that I wrestled and struggled with anxiety. At the time, I was enrolled in a grad program at George Fox Seminary. I was chartered to find a character issue that I struggled with that I'd never dealt with. And so after I worked through my list of 3,050, because I've got a lot of them, just like I'm assuming you do, I decided that I had these panic issues. And that's kind of weird to admit, and so I'd never talked about it, but I had a history of it. And so I started doing research on it, and the first thing I did was identified a book written by a well-respected, I soon learned, panic specialist. And as I started to read this book in order to put together, the design of the assignment, of course, was to do the work and get well in this area, all in 6 hours or less. So it's very doable. So I bought this book. I started reading the opening chapters. The opening chapters began to describe a phrase that I'd never used of myself before, and anxiety was the word that it kept using, anxiety and panic attacks. And to be honest with you, I was kind of humiliated by just how well those opening chapters were describing me. It was weird, reading through that going, oh man, this is me. It was also kind of freeing, because suddenly I went, oh wow, okay, so this is atypical perhaps, or an issue perhaps, but it's normal enough that people are writing books that are bestsellers on it, so that's helpful. And so that just I worked on it, and that just kind of laid dormant there for a while. And then this last year, it was an accident. I went to do a meeting, kind of a leadership meeting with some people in Bozeman. And about an hour into the meeting, I realized I was sitting across the table from a very well internationally respected psychologist, and next to him was a very well respected sociologist. They were professional therapists and Christ followers. And I just couldn't resist the opportunity to go, hey, could I talk to you about something personal? And I talked a little bit about this on Christmas Eve. You could pull that podcast. So she left the room, which I went I didn't know my issues were that serious, that it was just that obvious. She left, and I'm stuck with him, and I, for the first time in my life, said, I think I struggle with anxiety. And Peter was his name. He was a British guy. He began to walk me through some things I could do, and that led to a series of emails and some meetings and some different exercises. Well, that took me through the fall and the beginning of the winter. And then, strangely enough, I had an opportunity. Someone gifted me with an opportunity in late January to go to an event called Ultimate Leadership, which is really, if they called it what it is, nobody would go, because it's psychotherapy is what it is. It was 5 days with 2 of the best, most respected psychiatrists and yet Christ followers, John Townsend, Henry Cloud, and it's bombarded with leadership stuff, and then, sit in this circle and we're going to rip you to shreds kind of psychology stuff. And so I spent 5 days with them, talking with literally some of the most respected therapists in the California area, perhaps in the world, processing anxiety stuff. Left there, had some homework to do, did some of that homework. Met more recently when I got to town with a local therapist. Her name is Joan. She's phenomenal. There's about 25 people from this place meeting with her now because she's a Christ follower again, and this she's very steeped in the sciences. So my point is simply this. For the last year, I've been working hard on an issue that I've known I've had from the very beginning. or at least I've known since I was 29. I knew I had it since I was 29. I could see evidence of it in my life for as far back as I can go, like literally as far back as I can go. Ask me to pull an early childhood memory, I'll pull a story about me not handling anxiety well. Like, for example, when I was in second grade or somewhere in there, I was standing in line waiting to get my hot lunch, and suddenly my stomach hurt, and my heart was racing, and all I knew was, Mommy, like, I want out of here. And so, what do? You go to the school secretary and you say you're sick and you go home, and that's what I did. And that led to another time and another time. And before long, I never ate hot lunch at school again. In fact, I never ate at school again. I went home for lunch every day. And then I remember my mom got a job, and that was a big deal to me. And I so couldn't handle eating lunch at school that it was arranged that instead I would go to my grandpa, and my great-grandpa and grandma lived across the street from the school. And so you're going like, this guy is a wuss. I know exactly. So I spent the rest of my elementary years going across the street to my grandpa and grandma's house for lunch. This is, elementary. Fast forward to when I was 21, just a few days ago. I was on my honeymoon. I like cities and baseball. My wife likes mountains and grizzly bears. And so we went to Denver, spent a few days in town, and then went to Estes Park, went on this hike. And I still remember standing in this outdoor shop where we were telling us, hey, go on this hike, and it was 6 miles in. And the person starts talking about it's above tree line, and if the thunderstorms come in, you're toast. So make sure you get up there early because you don't want to be there when the thunderstorms come in, and because that'll be really miserable. And I'm like, she has no idea who she's talking to. I don't hike, but I'm trying to be the macho new husband. Okay, so we'll do this. We got to the trailhead at about 3 a.m., because I was bound and determined not to get stuck in a lightning storm. We flew up the hill. And I mean, like, we were passing people on the trail. I'm not exaggerating. Got to the top. It was 6 miles in. And then I remember we got to the top, and then we stopped moving. And those of you that struggle with anxiety know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, while you're moving, there's hope. When you have to stop, game over, right? And so we stopped. And suddenly my stomach hurt. And suddenly my heart was racing. And suddenly there was a bathroom. Weird, I know. And if you have anxiety, you can appreciate I needed the bathroom. So I went into the bathroom. I came out of the bathroom. I looked at my wife and said, we got to get out of here. And she was like, what is going on? I honestly didn't understand it. What I said to her is, I think I have altitude sickness, because that was one of the other things that very empathetic man in the store told us is, oh yeah, and by the way, you can get altitude sickness. If that happens, like, you just die, so it's not that big a deal. We zoomed down the hill. I can still remember passing people like halfway that we'd passed on our way up. Like, what are you guys doing? We're just getting out of here. So my point is, this is personal to me. I can relate to who you are. I can maybe relate to who you're married to, or maybe who you're raising. And what I want to do this morning is just back up the dump truck and go, like, here it is. Here is my own little cheat sheet of what I've learned. My hope is that it'll draw you closer to God if in fact you struggle with it. My hope is that it'll give you more empathy if you're married to someone, and that if you don't struggle with it, maybe you'll have an appreciation for why you don't. Because the first thing I learned, so I've got 5 points, because you know me, I like 5 points, right? Like, it's always about 5 points. So actually this morning, I've got 5 points, and the first one is simply this: anxiety is. What if anxiety isn't an option? Because that's the way we talk about it. We talk about anxiety as though it's an option. What if anxiety is a fact? What if it's an essential? What if it's just an assumed reality in the life of a human? In fact, what if the difference between the person who struggles with anxiety and the person who doesn't isn't that one person has it and the other one doesn't, but it's that the one who doesn't have anxiety has actually learned how to deal with their anxiety? Now, this for me was incredibly freeing in my journey, because the realization that that person's not just macho and just not made of something I'm not, but actually has skills I don't have, that's kind of freeing, isn't it? What if some people who don't struggle, what if people who don't struggle with anxiety have been taught things? See, here's the deal. It can become subconscious. I think those of you that don't, if you begin to look at your family of origin, what you'll discover is several generations of family members who dealt with fear, which is really what we're talking about, who dealt with it in really functional, really healthy ways. They didn't run from it. They weren't protected from it. They dealt with it. They learned how to live through it and push through it, and which ones are bad and which ones aren't. See, I hope that someday my kids intuitively get up and spend 15 minutes with the Lord in the text, simply because they've watched me do it their entire lives. I think that people who don't struggle with anxiety I don't think, what the research would say is they've had really good coaches, really good mentors, people who have walked them through this. And those of you who do, you simply lack skills that other people have. Now the question becomes why? If that's true, why? And here is where I love psychiatry. I love the sciences. I'm not good at them, but I love people who are. And I love the opportunity to understand truth as a Christ follower, because I think here's one of those places where God and his people have been on to this issue from the very beginning. So I want to take you back to the garden, to that proverbial moment where Adam and Eve chose themselves over God, their wishes over his wishes, however you want to frame that. To that moment right after the moment in Genesis 3. And starting in verse 8, just walk with me here. Then the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And they hid from the Lord God among the trees of the garden. But the Lord called to the man, "Where are you?" And he answered, "I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid, because I was naked. So I hid." So the first symptom of sin, according to the text, was what? It was shame. If you struggle with anxiety, you know that shame and anxiety are synonymous terms. You don't even need two words. One word will serve both purposes. Like what the text tells us is on the other side of sin was shame, was fear, was anxiety. Now why? Why suddenly do these people who were totally safe on the other side of a betrayal of God and a betrayal of this life with him, why did they have fear? Well, some would say it's because they suddenly recognize that they're little. That they live in a massive, uncontrollable, unpredictable, broken world. That they're the creature. They're not the creator. That try as they might, they can't control every circumstance. They can't control their future. They can't control their kids. They can't do much. See, post-Genesis 3, if you live in a post-Genesis 3 world, I'm going to suggest to you, and what the research would suggest, is that anxiety is. We're not talking about how do I get rid of anxiety. What we're talking about is how do I live with anxiety, which really leads to the second point, and that is that your alarm system is broken. See, what anxiety is you have built in, and again, I'm not a scientist. You could go talk to brilliant people who understand these things better and use bigger words. But you have a built-in system. Think of it like a fire alarm system that's designed to tell you when there's danger. Like that the reason why when you're standing on a train track and there's a train coming, you don't have to stop and think about, I should get off the train track, is because you have this system. Your brain can respond to certain things without you having to think. It's why your heart rate goes through the roof. It's why you have to use the bathroom, because suddenly all the blood is focused on a part of your brain that requires a high heart rate, that requires rapid breathing, that requires that you be able to move without having to think. But see, the problem is your alarm system's broken. And again, as a Christ follower, I'm going to go, well, I get it, because it's broken. Like we live in a broken world. And what that means is your alarm system, the fire alarm can be going off and there's no fire. But a person with anxiety and who doesn't understand how to live with anxiety, they don't have the skills to differentiate a good alarm, a reliable alarm, from a broken alarm. When Teresa and I were married for 5 years, we bought our first house in Billings. It was totally run down, hadn't been painted in like 30 years, but it was a neat house because a builder had built the house, and, well, a builder builds every house. A builder built all the houses on the block, and this was the one he built for himself. So it had all these kind of neat little nuances, but hadn't been updated in a long time and hadn't seen paint for, again, 30 years. So we move in, and I can't do much, but I can paint, right? Like that, anybody can paint. So I was working in this one hallway, and I came across this alarm system, like on the wall. And I love to throw stuff away. Anybody else? I love throwing stuff away. What's even better is to get to take something apart that you don't have to put together again, right? So I'm staring at this panel on the wall going, I'm going to hack this thing off. Well, I'm German. I don't pay for alarm systems. So I'm hacking this thing off. I'm never going to subscribe to the system. I'm going to cut the wires. So I start taking this thing apart and I'm throwing it away. And I get to the part where it's hanging by the wires. And I'm not very smart, but I'm smart enough to know a power cable when I see it. And so I go, okay, well, I better go find the breaker. So I went and I found the breaker, turned the breaker off. So now I'm not getting electrocuted. Cut the panel off the thing. And when I cut that panel off the front of it, immediately the most horrifying sound started billowing through our house. Wah, wah, wah. And then it would go, fire, wah, 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 fire. I don't understand what the heck was happening. So this horrible sound going on in our house. And then to make it worse, my wife pointed out that some genius had went up in the attic, and the little vent designed to make it so that your attic can breathe? They had mounted a 6-inch speaker facing out that vent that also had the alarm system going off. So the whole neighborhood was hearing this, wah, 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 fire, wah, wah. People were coming out of their house. There's no fire, there's no fire. But I didn't have a clue. I still don't remember who it was that pointed out to us that somewhere in the house, that system was connected to a 12-volt battery that was designed to run the alarm until it didn't have any more juice. And there's some kind of, I don't know what, I don't even remember where we found the thing. That's anxiety. You have an alarm that goes off. The question is it accurate? Is there really a fire? See, the person who doesn't struggle with anxiety has the skills necessary to go, the alarm is sounding, but that's because of this thing that happened 10 years ago. The alarm is sounding, but that's because I'm overstimulated, because this is a new experience. I've never done this before. The alarm is sounding, but it's not reliable. So I've got to do this annoying thing for the next 5 minutes. I've got to continue to live with this wah, 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 fire. I've got to learn to, I've got to give this message with the alarm going off in my head, even though I know it's going off and I'm kind of crazy, but it's not really accurate. And the person who has debilitating anxiety, what they've learned to do is when the alarm goes off, they retreat. And so we get to the airport and the alarm starts going off and we leave the airport. We get to fill in the blank, whatever it is for you. And see, we've learned to trust the alarm system too much. It's why my friend Peter, that first psychologist that I referenced, he said, Adam, when you're feeling those feelings, here's the questions you have to ask. What am I feeling and why am I feeling it? See, what that's designed to do is to get you to start going, okay, let me engage the part of my brain that doesn't just run from bears, not the fight or flight part. Let me engage the other part that has an IQ and can think and decide, is this really a dangerous situation? And of course, in business and in relationships, it's not even so simple as is it or is it not dangerous? It's, is this a risk that I should take, or is it one I should retreat from? Is this one worth taking? Is this one God would have me take? Dr. Cloud, the way he says it is feel it, name it, do it anyway. Feel it, name it, do it anyway. See, if you have anxiety, you know that what you hate is the feeling. That's what you hate. And as soon as you start getting the symptoms of the feeling, you start retreating from whatever might give you the feeling. Dr. Cloud says, no, feel it. In fact, he uses this, he says, give it a hug. When the feeling starts happening, you just walk right up and you hug it and you greet it and you name it. You start identifying what you're feeling. You start admitting to yourself what you're feeling. You start talking about it. Even better is talking about it. We'll get to that in a second. You start giving words to what's going on there. And then this is his visual. You take it by the hand and go, okay, so let's go. We're going to go do this together. And with the alarm blaring, you just do it anyway. Now, I know. It's easier said than done. Last Sunday, I was actually on vacation last week and then was here Sunday morning to help set up. And then the design was to leave and go for a long run because I'd been out of town for a while, so I hadn't got to do any running, and then to come back to 11:30 with my family. So I left here 7:40 and went for a run. I already said that. I went for a run, but I left at 8 o'clock, so I usually run much earlier than that. And you may have noticed it got a little warm in a week. And so I was running. It was hotter than it's been, probably 15 degrees than last time I did a long run. I was shooting for a 12, 13-mile run. I went on these trails up over top of Ascension, and the Eddie McClure trails, just phenomenal trails. Someone had just shown me those. Hadn't run them by myself yet. When they kind of spill you out onto South Hills, it's a 7-mile run from my house, and then kind of snake your way back in lots of different directions. Well, I got just about a half mile into the Eddie McClure part, so I was probably 3.5 miles from my house. And here I go, anxiety's building up because it's hot. And I'm going, that water bottle's almost gone. And I'm about to be a long ways from home. And I'm not with anybody. And I don't have my Dorothy shoes on. That's what I'm going through. And so I'm starting to think, and I'm literally thinking, because this is what happens, is you get really logical and you think, I could die out here. I could have heat stroke and die right here, and nobody will find me. Some black bear will find me 3 days from now. And all these things are going on in my head. And then... So I did this whole okay, Adam, the alarm's going off. And then I had this realization, Adam, And I forget what it was, like 3 or 4, you call it 4 miles in. You're 4 miles into a run. Like your daily like off day run, I'm not trying to brag, just trying to make a point. Your daily off day run is 7 miles. So like you're 4 miles in. Adam, you could do this in your sleep. And the logic of the alarm helped me so much because I was able to go, okay, so the alarm's going off, but I couldn't possibly be about to die of dehydration and in heat stroke because I'm 4 miles in. Like I do this all the time. And so, I mean, what I thought was going to be this enjoyable run where I'd listen to a bunch of podcasts and do a bunch of sermon research ended up being this like harrowing 2-hour experience where I had to tell myself I wasn't going to die. But I didn't die. Because your alarm system's broken, which gets to the third thing. Training is required. See, coping with anxiety, it's a learned skill. If it's true that it is, if it's true that in a broken world we all have it, if it's true that your system isn't reliable, then what that means is you need a coach. Dr. Cloud tells a story of a time where I think she was 8 years old at the time, but his daughter became locked in the bathroom of an airplane. Now, I think we can all agree, like, that would be miserable, right? Like, and she's 8, so she doesn't even have to crunch over. But I mean, how many of you think of that the moment you close the bathroom door on the door on the bathroom airplane? Like, oh gosh, if I get stuck in here. You don't have to admit that you're crazy like me, but I know you're out there. So needless to say, they finally got her out, and she had a complex with public bathrooms. And he's a psychiatrist, and so he was helping her with it. Finally, he had a plan. He took the family out to dinner. They got out to dinner. He somehow arranged it. I don't know exactly all the details, but knowing that early on, before they even ordered, she was going to have to go to the bathroom. Sure enough, turns out she has to go to the bathroom. And he's like, you need to go to the bathroom. She's like, I can't go to the bathroom. You need to go to the bathroom. I can't go to the bathroom. He said, okay, well, if you don't go to the bathroom, and he looks at his watch, in 10 minutes, you and I are leaving. Mom and the other kid, they'll stay here. You and I are leaving. 10 minutes passes. She hadn't gone to the bathroom. He said, okay, let's go. Kisses his wife goodbye, grabs his daughter. She's like, how are you going to get home? He said, I'll hail a cab. So they get out to the curb, and he's hailing a cab, and his daughter's like, okay, I'll do it. I said, okay. They walk back into the restaurant, and she's freaking out, of course. And he gets right to the bathroom door, and he said, okay, I'm going to be standing right here, and you're going to go in there, and you're going to go to the bathroom, and when you get out, I'm going to be standing right here. And so she did it. A little bit later, she had to go to the bathroom again. Okay, I'm going to be sitting at this table. You're going to go into the bathroom. You're going to come out. I'm going to be at this table. See, some of you grew up with a mom who just protected you from anything that was scary. And a dad, or maybe there was role reversal, who just kicked you in the butt and told you to be a man. That's not coaching. That's shame and coddling. That's not coaching. There's skills we have to learn. I have a friend, I really respect this guy, who is very much the man's man. And he had his first son here a year and a half ago. And he said to a mutual friend of ours, another person who I really respect, another's man's man, he said to him, okay, so it's your job to help me raise him to make sure he's not a wuss. But he didn't use the word wuss. See, I have a theory of what just happened there. I think what he was really saying was, would you please teach me to teach him how to deal with fear? But see, as someone who's really good at it, saying to another person who's really good at it, I'm not sure to what degree he even understands that. The issue is we need a coach. We need someone who won't shelter us, someone who can differentiate the risks worth taking from the ones not, and someone who will say, hey, you're going to do this, and the alarm's going to be going off, and that's perfectly normal. That's a part of growing up. That's a part of life. We all do things that are scary, but you're going to do it anyway, and then next time it'll be a whole lot easier to do, and next time after that, you actually might enjoy it. It's a coaching requirement. We need a coach. When I was at that leadership experience, there was a long kind of eloquent talk given on grieving. They call it Wailing Wednesday at this conference. Sounds like a blast, right? The idea was there's something holding you back that you've not dealt with, so grieve it so you can deal with it. And as he was given that talk, the more he gave it, the more angry I became. Because when you get to the conference, the first thing they say is, what do you want to work on? I said anxiety. He's talking about grieving, and I'm going, I don't have an incident. I don't have a moment. I don't have this thing. I wasn't beat when I was a kid. I don't have this thing I can take it back to. And the reality that began to set into me was, Adam, you're not going to leave this thing with a magic pill or a magic sentence, nothing. Like this is something that you're just going to have to live with. And we got back to our group, And again, this is like the most intense day of the whole deal. And this girl starts to talk, and she began to share that she'd been raped when she was in college. And if that weren't bad enough, that her friends said that she was a liar, the kid nothing ever happened to him, and her dad had really emphasized virginity to her, to the point, and this is where there's a lot of research about those true love waits rings, why they're actually kind of unhealthy, to the point where then now that she had been sexually active, she didn't feel comfortable talking openly with her dad about that. And so here she was, 10 years later, having not dealt with this thing. And literally, we're watching this girl in the fetal position. I'm watching this woman who's the most incredible therapist I'd ever seen. She's working through this with this gal. We get about an hour into it, and she says to the group, hey, tell her what you guys are thinking. Like, begin to tell her what you're thinking. And these guys, there's lots of very compassionate, very nice, godly people in our group, and they're saying these very encouraging things to her. She gets to me, and I was like, I just envy you. Now, that sounds really cold and callous. And I was like, don't get me wrong. I don't want to downplay what you experience. But I envy the fact that your thing is a day. It's a moment. It's something that you can, please don't misunderstand me here, but that you can deal with it and you can move forward. Of course, so now we get to the next group and everyone's like, hey, so Adam, there was a can of worms there. Let's talk about that. And what the guy had to start explaining to me was what I've just said under this coaching thing. Adam, anxiety is a learned skill. It's a skill that you don't have. It's undeveloped. Therefore, there's your hope. Now, if you have anxiety, you're already going, yeah. All these mental ideas, these are good things to know. The problem is, when I have anxiety, I can't think, right? It's all very counterintuitive because if you've ever had a panic attack, you don't have a brain, at least not the part that actually thinks. It's well said that you can't think your way out of a problem that you've acted your way into. That's anxiety. Which brings me to the fourth thing. It's called breathe. Now, just take a deep breath, will you? Some of you already did it intuitively. Did you know that scientifically, physiologically, you cannot panic and breathe deeply at the same time? It can't be done. The part of you that panics requires a high heart rate, short breaths, the adrenaline, everything required that comes with panicking is the opposite of a deep breath. You can't panic and take a deep breath. Now, I'm going to study this more, and I'm going to commit to you now. Sometime in the next year, we're going to delve into this a little bit deeper. But the connections in the text between breathing and God and His Spirit are insane. Like in the Bible, the Bible knows no difference between the word breathe and the word spirit. In the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, the word for breath is the word ruach. It's also the word for spirit. In the New Testament, the word is pneuma. There's no difference. Now watch this. This is so crazy. Because Jesus, towards the end of His time on earth, the disciples are having some anxiety. And Jesus says to them, but the advocate, the Holy Spirit, the pneuma, whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you all things and will remind you of everything I've said. And then, let's just go one more and then I'll make my observation. In 16:13, Jesus comes back at it again. He says, but when He, the Spirit of truth comes, He will guide you into all the truth. So psychiatrists say the way you undo a panic attack is you breathe. And what's the advantage of that? It activates the part of your brain that can actually get logical and think and go, you're not going to die, or you know what? If you want to be good at this, you've got to take this risk. If you want to actually be successful, you've got to take this risk. If you really want to follow God, you've got to be willing to move in this direction. The psychiatrists say, take a deep breath and that'll engage that part of your brain. And Jesus says, the Spirit will come and He'll guide you into all truth. The breath will come, and He'll guide you into all truth. I am not in any way trying to trivialize or humanize the Holy Spirit, but isn't it amazing That the advantages Jesus says the Holy Spirit, that he'll guide you back to the truth, back to the principles, back to the life that you committed to on Sunday morning, but now you're living in the real world and you're having anxiety and you just want to be safe again. You don't care what it costs. Jesus goes, the Holy Spirit will do that for you. So I'm on this run and I'm freaking out and I start breathing. And I'm not freaking out. And then I'm so not freaking out that then I'm freaking out again. And then I'm having fun, and then I'm freaking out. And then I'm not freaking out. And it hit me as I was running, holy cow. Like, my ability to breathe deep and my ability to cling to God as my rock and pillar and his truth as the guiding post of my life, they're synonymous. When I'm breathing, I can trust God. I can cling to his truths. I can walk with him, and I cannot panic. This breathing thing is huge, you guys. 10 deep breaths. You can't do it. Some would say that breathe in for 2, or breathe in for 1, out for 2. Some call it Lamaze, whatever it is you want to do. The breathing thing is huge, which gets me to this last point, and it's this idea of today. I was sitting in the airport before I went to that ultimate leadership thing. It was a Sunday afternoon. It was 4 o'clock, so I'm already tired. I'm staring out the windows at Mount Helena. I'm thinking, why do I want to leave this place again? I'm getting ready to board an airplane to Southern California by myself, to spend a week in a hotel room by myself with people I don't know at this creepy psychotherapy thing. Like, if anything gives me anxiety, it's everything that I'm committing myself to doing. And I'm sitting there, and I've been coaching myself since I was first invited, using the whole, like, what am I feeling? I'm all of it, working all of the plan, breathing all of it, because I'm starting to panic. And I'm thinking, well, all I got to do is call my wife and go home. And I've sucked my tail between my legs lots of times in my life. I can do that again. That's fine. And then I had this moment, and I don't want to over-spiritualize this, but I feel like God began to point something out to me, and I don't mean like audible voice. I mean like scripture memory coming to mind, which is why a guy like Dallas Willard says it's the most important discipline we can engage in. And the scripture that came to mind was Matthew 6:34. Go ahead, Jamie. Jesus says, therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. And the thought that I began to work through, and the thing that got me on the airplane and got me through the entire trip and has since been incredibly helpful to me on lots of different levels, was I just felt like God was going, hey, Adam, so do you trust me? Like, that you won't freak out and end up in a straitjacket in the next hour? Like, that I have what it takes to give you the courage and to do what you got to do for the next hour? Yeah. In fact, by that point, I was thinking, oh man, if all I had to do was travel on an airplane, read books, and go to bed when I got there, like, that actually sounds kind of fun. I could do that. And the realization that I came to was, Adam, your anxiety issue is tied to Wednesday. It's Sunday. You're worried about whether or not by Wednesday you're going to be so tired that you're going to have to, like, I don't know, get thrown in the funny farm or something. Like, you're worried about Thursday. You're worried about Friday. And the moment that God brought me to, and that quickly led me to the manna. And when Israel came out of Egypt, and God said, they're going like, we don't have any farms, we don't have anything. Like, how are we going to eat? And for 40 years, the way they ate was when they got up in the morning, there was food on the ground. And when they went to bed at night, there was these quail for dinner. And the text says, for 40 years, God did that. And remember what Moses said at the end of Deuteronomy? Moses said to them, he said, hey, guys, God did that so that you would know that God is faithful every day, that you rely upon him more than you would ever realize. And do you remember the warning of Deuteronomy? The warning was, someday you're going to end up in cities you did not build, with vineyards you did not plant, with houses that feel really safe and secure, and the internet and technology and hospitals, and you're going to start thinking you are safe and secure because of where you lived. And it's going to be really easy to forget that each and every day you rely upon God to sustain you. For me, next to the breathing, the most helpful thing has been returning to God, I know I can get through this hour. I know I can get through the first leg of this backpacking trip. Like, I know I can get through fill in the blank. And tomorrow, well, the same God who was here today will be there tomorrow. And yet where my struggle was, and I had a breakthrough on this last week. Sorry for all the first-person pronouns, but this is my vice. The struggle has always been, and I don't know if you can relate to this, but someday the story doesn't have a happy ending and the bear does show up and eat you and you die. Right? Like someday the worst case scenario is going to happen, right? Like at some point somebody you love is going to die, if not you, your spouse. At some point tragedy is going to strike. At some point there's going to be something very unfortunate and the ending won't be all glorious and God was faithful. And I've been working, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, really hard on the resurrection and its importance. And it hit me on a run over the 4th of July. That if I believe Jesus is Messiah and Lord, if I believe the tomb is empty, if I believe the cross was there to bear the weight of my sin, if I believe that God's Spirit is a deposit of what's to come, then that day when I die, experientially, won't be the day God wasn't faithful. It'll be the day of his greatest faithfulness. Like the day, if I believe that upon death, I'm ushered into the presence of God because of the grace of Christ, then in that very day, when I look back on my life, I will say the day I died will actually be the day God was most faithful. Do you follow that? And it just further frees me up to go, okay, Lord, I just believe you're faithful today. And the God who got me through this thing and that thing and that thing and that thing is the same one today. And so anxiety is. Problem is your alarm system is messed up, which means you're going to need coaching. Some of you may need professional therapy. Others of you might just need to begin to speak more candidly with your spouse or those around you and stop couching what is fear in other excuses. And you're going to have to learn to breathe. Joan's challenge to me is to take one deep breath an hour. Because she would say that people who struggle with anxiety, they just live, as one of my friends, that statement of wound up like an 8-day clock. So you just have to teach your body to chill out a little bit. And then to cling to the fact that God is faithful today. The best book, I'll finish on this, the best thing I read or the most inspiring thing I read on anxiety was The Hobbit. I really recommend you pick it up again. Because do you remember in the beginning, Bilbo Baggins, he's hanging out in the Shire. It's comfortable. It's nice. He's got his pipe. He's got his wine. He's got his place. And Gandalf, who's very much a divine character in the book, he shows up. And remember Gandalf says to Bilbo, he says, I'm looking to take you on adventure. And this is what I don't like about the movies, is Bilbo Baggins is a pathetic hero in the book. And in the movie, they make him this very, very, willing hero. In the book, he's a very reluctant, cowardly, not army ranger kind of guy. And Gandalf says, Bilbo, I'm looking to take you on adventure. And Bilbo says, oh, I hate adventure. They're terrible things. They make you late for dinner. It's the best line. And I think Gandalf gets it. I think J.R.R. Tolkien got it. That the God of the Bible is a God who wants to take you on adventure. And to do so, he's going to walk close next to you, and he's going to coach you through your fears. I'm serious. One of the best things you could do is read The Hobbit as you struggle, because what you see is one thing after another where Bilbo has to feel it, name it, and do it anyway. And a whole bunch of days like that led up to a lifetime of that. So I don't know where your struggle's at. I guess I would like to end by saying, I have no means of understanding how I would work through my anxiety were it not for the promises of the resurrection and the faithfulness of his Spirit. And my prayer for you is that maybe for you, your anxiety, maybe it's your thorn. Maybe it's that thing in your life that God is using to bring you near to himself. Maybe you're married to somebody who struggles with this, and suddenly there's a little more empathy as you begin to understand why you don't struggle and they do.
If you would like to engage further with Narrate Church, you can find contact information online, www.narratechurch.org. We would love to hear from you.